Information is power. Everyone wants power. So feel powerful with the NTA News mobile.
And other entrepreneurs have made Nigeria self-sufficient in cement and a net exporter of this strategic product.
Towards sustainable growth, President Buhari inaugurates Bua Cement Factory in Sokoto.
Nigeria Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission revokes 31 licenses issued to awardees of 2020 marginal oil field bid.
Federal government inaugurates health sector reform committee.
And on Good Morning Nigeria this Friday, we shall discuss issues in fuel subsidy. The introduction of fuel subsidy by the Nigerian government in the 1970s was a response to the oil shock in 1973. And since then, attempts at removing these subsidies have met brick walls, despite arguments of the leverage this provides for servicing other development and infrastructure projects.
All right. While almost everyone or economists insist that the removal of subsidy is inevitable, of course, towards the much needed reform. But continued opposition by Nigerians over the years remains unabated. And again, some people believe that a contributory factor is sabotage, leading to, of course, the unsuccessful attempts by governments to resolve the crisis in the Nigeria's downstream petroleum sector.
And an attempt in 2012 by the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, with an adjustment of the pump price of petrol from 65 naira per litre to 141 naira, sparked the popular Occupy Nigeria mass protests across major cities, inevitably causing a truce and a reduction to 87 naira per litre in 2015.
All right, so many factors have, compelled government, to make the various adjustments. And of course, one of those issues will be the COVID-19 pandemic, fluctuations in the global oil market. And several times we've had policy adjustments, just to contain the gap that's, of course, in the prices of petroleum products per litre. We already have 165 naira per litre, and of course, heightening government's resolve for a fuel subsidy removal regime by the second half in 2022. That's, of course, this year as contained in the Petroleum Industry Act.
All right, and of course, this replay was even more unavoidable when the World Bank sounded the alarm to Nigeria, saying a further delay in the fuel subsidy removal would drain the pockets of federal and state governments, with both parties unable to pay salaries this year.
All right, now more worrisome is the statistics that over 2 trillion naira was spent on fuel subsidy last year. Now, reports also indicate that prices of petroleum products were 100% higher in neighboring countries.
Now, the situation even gets worrisome, with the economists revealing that at a projected 1.86 million barrels daily, oil production in the country's 2021 budget, Nigeria recorded a deficit of almost 200 million barrels in the first 11 months of 2021.
Well, for the federal government and indeed everyone, the pointers were clear and something had to be done quickly. We face the consequences, of course, as envisaged. Now, this instructed a compromise, with the consideration, of course, of a proposed transport palliative. We saw that the 5,000 naira that was proposed and other options, of course, to cushion the effect that the planned subsidy removal, which has been suspended, will impact on the people. But of course, it complied the provisions of the Petroleum Industry Act, which was signed by the president to fully deregulate the prices of the petroleum products.
But the public sentiments and the Nigerian Labour Congress wouldn't hear that because they vehemently oppose the move with a proposed strike action to commence, that would have commenced actually on January 27th. Thankfully, President Muhammadu Buhari waded in with an announcement suspending the fuel subsidy removal for the next 18 months, saying the timing is problematic and will worsen the sufferings of Nigerians. And Claire, I'm also wondering what will happen after 18 months. And of course, this government would have expired by then. So the incoming government will, of course, have to tackle the issue. This is a situation that has not been resolved since the 1970s. And I wonder the mechanism or the mechanic that will be put in place to remove this all-important fuel subsidy.
Kieran, there are, if you look deeper, there are mechanisms already in place. But the question will be, will those framework be actualized? Will they be implemented? For instance, you do know that licenses were granted to some companies to begin modular refineries, and this is supposed to help reduce costs of import of petroleum products into the country. So that's one step, and there are also other planned projects, like of course the conversion of gas, which is targeted at making Nigerians.
You're even going far, because when you talk about conversion of gas, that's another project altogether. During the Obasanjo administration, I can still recall vividly that about 7 licenses were issued for modular refinery. And even under Goodluck Jonathan, more licenses were also issued. So the question is, why has it been so difficult for these licensees, to embark on modular refinery?
You just read.
And again, why is it that the 4 refineries we have in the country cannot, function at optimal capacity? So these are just the issues. Because if you keep importing fuel, of course, removal of oil fuel subsidy will be very difficult.
All right, Kieran, of course, that's the subject of our conversation this morning. Of course, just to add that the Federal Executive Council on Wednesday approved the proposed amendment to the 2022 budget of 3 trillion naira to accommodate additional subsidy funding in 1 year. Now, also pushing the narrative to a more positive light. The House of Representatives, that's the leadership of the House of Representatives, at the commencement of plenary Wednesday, set up 2 ad hoc committees to conduct investigation, one on the issues relating to the fuel subsidy and state of refineries in Nigeria. So,
well, it's nearly 70 years of oil exploration, and Nigeria still cannot deliver on efficient and effective petroleum refineries. What happens after the 18 months, which of course I asked earlier on, and what are those issues emanating from fuel subsidy? This and more will form the crux of our conversation this morning on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kirian Umayo.
I am Claire Adilabu Abdul Razak. Welcome to the last edition for this week. We thank you for watching. There'll be the complimentary segments talking about newspaper review, business. But let's get started with Elizabeth Omori in the newsroom to bring us highlights of the morning news. Elizabeth, good morning. Good to see you here.
Good morning, Claire and Kieran. Good to see both of you as well. And welcome to the news segment. An ultra-modern 3 million metric tons per annum Boa Cement Line 4 factory has been inaugurated by President Muhammadu Buhari in Sokoto State. The coming on stream of the multi-billion naira project, the president says, clearly indicates that government efforts and encouraging strong and sustainable economic growth is not detracted by security issues.
I want to now call on all entrepreneurs and businesses to emulate what is being done here. The task of nation building requires all hands to be on deck.
I must especially commend the chairman of Bar Group, Alhaji Abdusamad Isaac Rabiu, for his patriotism and uncommon entrepreneurial spirit.
President Muhammadu Buhari has again directed the nation's armed forces and other security services to deal decisively and mercilessly with anyone or group undermining efforts at achieving sustainable peace, security and stability in the country. This was at the palace of the Sultan of Sokoto, Mohammed Saad Abubakar, during a sympathy visit.
Every day we are worried about what is happening in the Northwest. We are going to do our best, and the military and law enforcement agencies have been given clear orders that they shouldn't spare any bandit or any terrorist.
Thank you for the concern you have always expressed publicly about the happenings not only in Northwest but all parts of the country. And I assure you we'll continue to cooperate and pray for you to succeed.
In the meantime, President Muhammadu Buhari has described as painful his inability to visit Zamfara State as planned due to bad weather. This is contained in a video message to the government and people of the state shortly after the trip was put on hold. The president was scheduled to proceed to Gusau from Sokoto, but the inclement weather condition made it impossible for his helicopter to fly and therefore had to return to Abuja.
I understand how you feel about this development, but I know that you will agree with me that Allah knows best. I particularly sympathize with your governor, Bello Matolle, and his cabinet, who have put everything in place to make the visit a successful one. I look forward to a more weather-friendly period when I will visit you.
In other news, the Nigerian Police Force helicopter Bell 4295 and NTA flying from Abuja to Bauchi on Wednesday, February 26, 2022 was involved in a controlled safe landing at the Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa International Airport, Bauchi. A statement by the Force Public Relations Officer Frank Kumba indicates that the aircraft did not crash as been reported in some sections of the media, and none of the occupants sustained injury, and all 6 on board, including the pilot and co-pilot, are in good condition. Similarly, the aircraft, which was flown by one of the best placed pilots, was professionally safe landed with minor damage on the rear rotor as a result of obstacle at the landing spots. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police, Usman Alkali Baba, has commended the police air wing for their professionalism in safe landing the aircraft and averting any serious air mishap. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has inaugurated the Health Sector Reform Committee set up by President Muhammadu Buhari and urged members to brace up for the task ahead. The Vice President, during the inauguration, re-echoed that to the President, a modern and people-oriented healthcare is fundamental to his own vision for the country's growth and development.
I want to mention that a series of stakeholder consultations were carried out with relevant ministries, departments and agencies, health unions and key stakeholders in the sector. So the report of that comprehensive effort is probably what has brought us to where we are today.
The House of Representatives has urged the Central Bank of Nigeria to suspend the implementation of the recently introduced guidelines on imports and exports. The sudden implementation of the House believes will result in distortion of prices of goods and services, cause congestion at ports, and delay transactions.
The Bank of Nigeria has gradually deviated from its primary function of monetary policy measures and bankers to government and concentrate more on fiscal policy measures, which is the function of the Federal Ministry of Finance.
Talking oil and gas now, the Nigeria Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission has revoked 33 out of the 161 licenses issued to awardees of the 2020 marginal oil field bid exercise. Chief Executive Officer of the Commission, Benga Komolafe, says that decision was taken due to the failure by the awardees to pay their signature bonuses.
Basically, the marginal feed bid round specified a time space, duration of 45 days for the payment of the signature bonus. And we actually observed that some of the awardees actually failed to make payment within this time space. And have 33 awards that were not paid for which they did not furnish consideration, and those awards have come back to the basket.
Meanwhile, the immediate past secretary to Ekiti State Government, Abiodun Oyebanji, has won the APC primary for June 18 governorship election. Details of this will come in our subsequent bulletin. And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Claire and Kieran after this break. Do stay with us.
The Nigerian aviation sector is rapidly growing with the construction of new international airport terminals in several regions of the country. The new Murtala Mohammed International Airport has an estimated passenger increase of 30 million annually and 15 million for Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. Malam Aminu Kano International Airport is also expected to open new frontiers for the region with more travel capacity for the annual Hajj, while the new Akanu Ibiam International Airport, Enugu, avails more business opportunities connecting the industrial cities in the region to the world. This new terminals beat world-class standards with enabling infrastructure that aid air travel, tourism, and the eventual growth of the country's GDP.
Open up commerce and, of course, link us to international societies.
People from international community will come here to do business, and then that will bring in more revenue to the state.
Now, distances can be seamlessly covered as Nigeria keeps raising its bar to suit global infrastructure standards. There's a drop of goodness in everyone. Share goodness with someone today.
Malta Guinness. Enjoy a world of good.
Shola, come and help me. You need to learn.
But I'm more interested in drawing.
How are you going to be part of the business if you don't learn?
You just don't understand.
Morning. Anyone for some Lipton?
The rich taste of Lipton awakens body and mind.
Let me have a look at your drawings. Son, these designs are amazing.
Lipton Yellow Label Tea. Awaken to what really matters.
Ibrahim, to the right. Mila, you go to the left. Just gotta do it.
Thank you for the rejections. That taught me to keep striving. Thank you for the long hours. That taught me discipline. Thank you for the knockdowns. That taught me to bounce back. And for the unexpected victories, that taught me to never give up.
Please welcome Dr. Shixie.
Thank you for making me who I am.
Contemporary times require practical skills to remain competitive and relevant in your organization. Therefore, take advantage of NTA TV College Short Proficiency courses to sharpen your professional skills. Computer Appreciation for Media Practitioners. Date 21st February to 28th February 2022. 1 week. English Grammar and Pronunciation for Broadcasters. Date 1st March to 25th March. 4 weeks. Administrative Principles, Processes and Practices. Date 11th March to 31st March 2022. 4 weeks. Modern Trends in Broadcast Media Marketing. Date 14th March to 13th April 2022. 4 weeks. Basic Broadcast Accounting and Auditing. Date 4th April to 19th April 2022. 2 weeks. The course fee for the 1 week course is 100,000 naira per participant. The fee for the 2 week course is 150,000 naira, while the course fee for the 4 week course is 180,000 naira only, accommodation inclusive. The venue for all courses is the serene and secure environment of NTA TV College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. For more inquiries, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
Welcome back. This is Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA, and our Twitter handle is at NTA Chairman. Let's now take some business stories. An International Monetary Fund is retaining its 2022 growth forecast for Nigeria. Alika Okwanachi Arwa gives us the details.
The International Monetary Fund, IMF, had in its October report last year projected a 2.7% growth rate for 2022 and 2.6% for 2023. In its January World Economic Outlook report, the IMF downgraded its growth forecast for sub-Saharan Africa to 3.7% and 4.0% for 2022 and 2023, from 3.6% and 3.9% forecast in its October 2021 World Economic Outlook report. The IMF also reduced its forecast for global economic growth to 4.4% in 2023, representing 0.5 percentage points lower than the 4.9% projected in October. IMF says the decline will be triggered majorly by the COVID-19 variant spreads and inflation. With business news, Alika Okwanachi Arwa.
So Alika Okwanachi Arwa with business news. Thank you. Next on the program is newspaper review.
And I love welcoming Bayo Toyebi to Good Morning Nigeria on Fridays.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Bayo.
Thank God it's Friday.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Bayo, you're welcome.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, we begin with the Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper above the nameplate. Unused GSM lines hit 108 million in 2021, says NCC. That's on page 21. PSC workers embark on 3-day strike over constables recruitment. That's on page 8. Supreme Court decides alleged 32.8 billion embezzlement by pension director on April 22. That's on page 8 as well. Now on page 21 of the Punch, we have 33 successful bidders lose federal government's marginal oil field award. NNPC to deduct 127 billion naira from FARC plans $5 billion Afrexim Bank loan. That's on page 23. Police differ. AIB begins probe of Bauchi police helicopter crash. That's on page 21. The lead story on the Punch newspaper this morning: how security reports forced Buhari to cancel planned subsidy removal. They're saying it is security report, but of course we've had that because of weather, clement weather. All right, it has 3 riders. Federal government feared subsidy protests could be worse than NSAS at source. Reps to summon major oil marketers, transporters, customs, others World Bank, IMF may decline Nigeria's loan request over fuel subsidy. Now, below the photo story here, we have Northwest APC legislators endorse Bello for 2023 presidency. Back Buhari on page 9. Buhari's visit presidency blames poor visibility. Matawale says shift, act of God. That's on page 8. Kaduna reporter gets 1 million naira bail after 83 days in detention. That's on page 20. At the bottom of the Punch, Tinubu, Nigeria's widest choice for 2023 presidency, according to Sanwo-Olu, the governor of Lagos State. That's on page 6. His by rates Kano Shisha joins, arrests 25 smokers, seizes pipes. That's on page 5. 21 federal roads under construction in Kano, according to Fashola, the Minister of Works and Housing. That's on page 21. Claire.
Okay, let's take a look at what's trending on the front page of The Sun. And the lead story says Buhari gives military fresh marching orders, tells them to be more ruthless and decisive against terrorists, bandits, and others causing insecurity. Says Nigeria shall win battle over evil. And I'd like to say that again. The lead story, Buhari gives military fresh marching orders. That's the lead story on the front page of the Daily Sun. And it comes with two, right? Of course, you see the riders there. I read it to you all around. Tells them to be more ruthless and decisive against terrorists, bandits, and others causing insecurity, and that Nigeria shall win battle over evil. Okay, just quickly up there, you can also see that story. UAE lifts travel ban on Nigeria and 11 other countries. Details of that story on page 23. Let me take you a bit down the leading story now, and you see the story on the alleged chopper crash. Police debunks chopper crash in Bauchi, and the writer says PSC workers protest. That's Police Service Commission workers protest police recruitment. Of course, details of that you can find on page 4. And there's another story there, just below that story. President pledges more infrastructure to boost private sector investments. It's also there on the front page. And just beneath that story, it's a sad development. 2 dead, 22 houses razed in Delta gas explosion. Delta gas explosion, of course, another addition, 57 houses burnt in Niger fire accidents. And just to take a look at security stories, Ugwai, that's the Enugu State Governor, wins Most Peaceful Governor Award. Ugwai wins Most Peaceful Governor Award. And details of that on page 22. And on stories, Ekiti gubernatorial contest, confusion, protest, rock APC, PDP primaries. It's on page 6. Contestants reject results. It's also trending on the front page of the Daily Sun. And just before I bring in Bayo, if we can go a bit, just towards the headline story. Hush Puppy. Police Service Commission orders fresh probe of Abba Kyari. Details of that on page 4. Bayo, which is your pick?
Well, let's start with the issue of report about a helicopter accident in Bauchi.
I like the way you put it.
The Accident Investigation Bureau of Nigeria says a Bell 429 helicopter of the Nigerian police was involved in an accident at Bauchi. However, some media reported that the plane had crashed. The police high command says that it was a controlled state of landing, controlled safe landing, and it added none of the occupants of the aircraft was injured. The pilot, co-pilot, and all the 6 on board are in good condition. There was only a minor damage to the rear rotor of the aircraft. Now, let me go to the story that Claire read about the order given by Mr. President Mr. President, while visiting the Sultan of Sokoto on a courtesy, emphasized that he is confident that Nigeria will win the battle over evil. He declared, I gave them specific orders not to spare any bandit or terrorist threatening the lives and property of innocent Nigerians. Governor Aminu Waziri Tambuwal and the Sultan all thanked the president, particularly that he had paid a visit to sympathize with them over the recent killings in Sokoto State. Earlier, the president commissioned a 3 million metric ton cement plant, line 4 at Sokoto. This brings to 4 the number of cement plants commissioned by the Bua Cement Group in 4 years. The president reiterated the economic pillar of his administration to create the enabling environment for business to thrive. He recalled his visit to Ogun and Kaduna State, where he said he saw private sector investment in action. He stressed the preparedness.
Now, sorry, but I'm not cutting you short, right? Because one of the key things you just mentioned now is cement, And for some time now, cement is not within the reach of an average Nigerian. If you are building and you go for cement, it's over 4,000 naira, 4,800 naira, 4,500 maybe.
4,008.
Right. So if we have a number of cement factories in the country and it is not impacting on the price of cement, then that's something to worry about.
Yes, it's worrying because the governor of the central bank testified that for over 5 years now, no dime has been allocated for importation of cement because Nigeria has attained self-sufficiency in cement production. But the question is, why is it that so expensive in the market?
Exactly.
Just 2 years back, one of the leading producers of cement in the country has specifically said that cement was going to be sold at 1,000 naira. And here we are today, cement is 4,800, almost close to 5,000 naira.
And nobody is questioning that because there must be a reason for that. Because the primary, precursor, for cement production is in abundance in Nigeria.
Yes, all the raw materials.
All the raw materials are in Nigeria. So why the cost?
Following the president's visit to Sokoto, he was supposed to have proceeded to Zamfara on a condolence visit, particularly about the killings in Anka and Bukuyu. But that had to be deferred because of poor visibility. Indications were that weather was supposed to have been 1,200 meters, had dropped to as low as 300 to 400, so it was deemed not quite safe for the visit. A future date is to be announced for the visit on the condolence. Meanwhile, the All Progressive Congress and the People Democratic Party have conducted their primaries for the governorship election in Ekiti, which is scheduled for 18th of June. The Tribune reports that Mr. Bisi Kolawole polled 671 votes to beat Mr. Segun Oni, who garnered 330 votes. There were 6 other contestants, with Abiodun Olujimi pulling out of the contest.
I'm surprised that Segun Oni is contesting for governorship of Ekiti State. He's been there.
If you want, you can also contest.
He has a right.
Yes,
he's been there.
He has a democratic
right. The chairman
right
of that primary was the governor of Akwa Ibom State, and he called on all to rally round for the success of the party. For the All Progressive Congress, Mr. Biodun Oyebanji is reported to, in the Punch too, to have claimed the ticket of the APC. The chairman of the governorship primaries and governor of Jigawa, Abubakar Badaru, announced that Biodun Oyebanji scored 101,703 votes to beat Kayode Ojo, who came second with 767 votes. But however, before the vote, there were protests by 8. There were 8 contestants. 7 of them had protested that the aspirants, one aspirant had the list of local government election committee to be appointed by him, and therefore the
certainly we're going to hear more,
yes,
from that, because litigations have not even started, and I mean it's expected after, because we don't know whether they use direct primaries or indirect primaries. I don't know the method that they applied, that they deployed, to...
There's been some success in Rivers State. 27 illegal refineries have been destroyed in Akukutoro local government area of Rivers State. The SAC force, led by the chairman of the local government council, Roland Sekibo, destroyed these illegal refineries at Obobona Creeks. You recall that the governor had indicated cash awards for local government chairman, challenging them that anybody in whose local government area illegal refineries are found will be held accountable.
All right,
but now we're getting results.
Just before we bid our goodbyes, there's this story I'd like you to look at, and I'd like to hear what you think about how it's cast. Ugwanyi wins most peaceful governor.
Most peaceful governor. Well,
is it the governor that is peaceful, or I don't understand how that award was.
Well, the intendment of the award is to honor the governor that is described as the most peaceful, in the sense that he adopts a more consensus and conciliatory approach to developments in his area. You will recall there was a time, there was a crisis between farmers and herders in his in one local government area in Enugu. He went out of his way to make contact with the persons to try and reconcile them. He is a gentleman governor. I have no doubt. But you are talking about the grammatical casting of the headline.
Now that you have explained it, it's clear to you.
He's actually my governor.
Okay.
He's a very peaceful person. No doubt about that. And he has also brought peace. In Enugu State. No political wranglings. No.
If I allow Kirian.
No, I'm just being honest, because of course Enugu used to be very hot politically, right?
The producer is asking you to
okay, so please. Bayo, please, we'll see you again on Monday, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We will take a short break now. When we return, we'll be looking at issues in fuel subsidy. Stay with us.
There's a drop of goodness in everyone. Share goodness with someone today.
Malta Guinness. Enjoy a world of good.
The center is purposely established in order to provide these services that are examinations, medical examinations, and investigations that were not provided for in Kano as well as the entire Northwest region. It's equipped with modern technological equipment in terms of radiological services. We have MRI 1.5 Tesla. We have digital X-ray as well as 4D ultrasound equipment. The importance of the center cannot be overemphasized. Just within 1 year, the center attended to thousands and numerous patients as well as medical examinations. NKDC is established in order also to provide these healthcare facilities at a discounted price.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Arise, O Nigerians. Let's applaud the courage of Flight Lieutenant Abayomi Dairo, aka the Aggressor, for his skillful and dogged escape from the bloodthirsty bandits in the forest of Zamfara State. 3 hearty cheers also to all military and security personnel who are tirelessly protecting fellow Nigerians from insurgency and banditry while maintaining peace and order. Nigerians are proud of Abayomi Dairo and all our gallant men and women in uniform for sacrificing so much to keep us safe. We admire your courage and we say thank you. God bless the armed forces. God bless Nigeria. This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture. drop of goodness in everyone. Share goodness with someone today.
Malta Guinness. Enjoy a world of good.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
NTA TV College invites candidates who selected the institution as their first choice in the 2021-2022 JAMB Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination and obtained a minimum score of 180 for screening. Also invited are direct entry candidates who selected the college as their first choice. Date, Saturday, 29th January 2022. Time, 8 a.m. Venue, NTA Television College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. Screening fee, 2,000 naira only. Payment should be done through remitter platform only in favor of NTA Television College. All candidates are to come along with their original credentials. Registrar, Announcer.
All right, welcome back to the program. It's Good Morning Nigeria. Conversation starts almost immediately on issues on fuel subsidy. Again, let me remind you that you can be part of this conversation by, of course, joining us using our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. Let's begin with this background report put together by Ekene Njulwe.
The phrase removal of fuel subsidy is one that has consistently found its way in Nigeria's lexicon. Each time it starts trending, it usually portends a looming crisis among the citizenry. This is because price of fuel inadvertently affects the cost of most items in the country. With the emergence of the new Petroleum Industry Act, it was only a matter of time before subsidy on petroleum products will be removed. Many were already bracing themselves for the impact this will have on their livelihoods, while others have no clue on what to do next. On the part of the Nigerian Labour Congress, they had already resumed a countdown for a nationwide protest slated for 27th January. However, the protest was not to be, as the federal government announced the suspension of the removal of fuel subsidy as a result of the prevailing economic realities in the country.
Practically, there is still heightened inflation, and also removal of subsidy will further worsen the situation, thereby imposing more difficulties on the citizens. And Mr. President clearly does not want to do that. In terms of putting in place a number of measures, one of which is the deployment of an alternative to the PMS, which is the CND, and also the rollout of enhanced refining capacity in the country, including the 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery, and also the rehabilitation of the 4 national refineries that have a combined nameplate capacity of 450,000 barrels per day.
Consequently, Nigerian Labour Congress called off the proposed industrial action while urging the federal government to do the needful by ensuring that Nigeria's crude oil is refined locally.
Whether there is subsidy or not, whether we call it subsidy, we call it deregulation, we call it fuel price hike, they mean the same thing, that Nigerians are going to pay more. And that can be ended if we're able to refine products for domestic use. So the approach of Labour, which we have remained very consistent, is for us to muster the political will to allow the 4 refineries to work and also encourage private refineries to also spring up.
The federal government had suspended the removal of fuel subsidy for 18 months, conceding that the necessary infrastructure needs to be put in place to enhance Nigeria's refining capacity for crude oil. At Wednesday's Federal Executive meeting, additional funding to the tune of 3 trillion naira was proposed towards meeting the requirements for incremental fuel subsidy in the 2022 Appropriation Act. However, many still express concern that all previous efforts towards revamping refineries in Nigeria did not yield results. Why are the refineries not working? Why have the issues around subsidies persisted over several administrations? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be speaking to the issues in a moment.
And with us in the studio here to discuss the issues in oil subsidy is Mr. Odion Omofaman. Odion Omofaman is an energy expert and CEO, New Hampshire. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, and also here with us in the studio is Comrade Issa Aremu. Comrade Issa Aremu is the DG Michael Imodu Labour Institute. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Karen. I want to say good morning, Nigerians.
All right, we have two guests joining us via Zoom. First, let me introduce from Abeokuta, Olabode Shomi, and he is the CEO, Cap3 Limited. We'd like to appreciate your presence with us this morning. Mr. Labode. Okay, and also joining us via Zoom, Tengi George Ikoli. Tengi is a lawyer, an economist, and also a public policy expert, and she has the bias for oil and gas, or a bias in oil and gas. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining us, Tengi.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen and lady, it's good to really have you with us on the show today. Now, the introduction of oil subsidy by the federal government took place in the early 70s as a way of absorbing the oil shock that the nation experienced in 1973. But I'm just wondering whether there was indeed a need for the subsidy removal in the first instance, and I'd like Odion to give us a sense of the action taken by the government at that time. Was this as a necessity, or was there no other means of tackling that shock than the introduction of the subsidy? Let us just go to have a little historical backdrop.
Thank you again, and good morning, Nigerians. At the time, the oil price shock of the 70s affected a lot of economies. And the recourse by the federal government then was to try as much as possible to make sure Nigerians didn't feel the brunt of the rising oil prices, similar to what we have today where oil prices have spiked. And the spike was quite very sudden in the 70s. So what they did was to try and cap the pump price, right, to say Nigerians will buy at this pump price, and then the federal government would absorb the differential. Why it has persisted till more than 40 years afterwards is I don't know, it's something unbelievable. But we're where we are today. It's a case of are Nigerians poorer than they were in the 70s, and do we still keep subsidizing petrol for Nigerians? But it's also important I mention that only petrol is subsidized. Kerosene, aviation fuel, diesel, they are not subsidized, they're not deregulated. They're deregulated, and you can buy at the landing price. So why PMS? I guess as we go in this discussion, we'll find out why there's a bias for PMS. But we're back again at this conversation. It seems to be a never-ending discussion. Do we remove subsidy at some point? We've changed subsidy to under recovery and over recovery. So we're where we are today because of economic issues or global issues that are outside of our control, and a lot of internal problems that we haven't kept in check. Our refineries are not working. We have to almost 100% depend on imported products. And you have a naira that is depreciating on a daily basis. So by the time you put all that into play, it creates a situation where you wonder if Nigerians can bear the brunt of the true landing cost of petrol.
All right. When we talk about this fuel subsidy removal, whether or not to remove it or to retain it, I'm sure at this stage everybody, wants fuel. I mean, nobody wants the fuel subsidy to subsist. Everybody agrees that fuel subsidy is not good for us at this time. It's not sustainable. It's not good for the economy. Both economists, labor, but we don't want it to be removed. The case of, one eating one's cake and, wanting it back, I don't know. I want to talk to the DJ now. That's Comrade Issa Remo, because you have been in this business. You have been a labor man. You have championed, issues surrounding subsidy removal or whatnot and all that. How is the subsidy removal in relation to the PIA?
Well, thank you very much, Claire. I think you've said it all, but let me put it this way to say that the challenge at hand is about how do we manage reform. And regardless of the argument for and against, I think I want to say that it's a good development for Nigeria. Because
but sorry, sir.
Yes.
Everybody agree that fuel subsidy is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Does Labour agree?
No, I think you said so much.
No, does Labour agree?
No, let me respond to you. Okay. You said so. I've been involved in this, for a long time. You also gave my profile now. But what I'm saying is that let's come to your pointed question, Labour. I think I want to salute the organized Labour for the deference which the National Executive Council of NSC did in response to the federal government putting the implementation on hold. I mean, we just listened to your tape now, and I could see the Honorable Minister for Finance explaining why the policy has to be put on hold. For a number of issues, some few things have to be put in place. Some structures have to be in place. You need to address the refinery. You need to address issue raised about even the context under which you hear now, high level of inflation, food inflation, now the implication of pricing. It's commendable that NSC responded to that to say, also because government put it on hold, we also put our protests on hold. And I think it's very, very important because for whatever reason, you know very well, Claire, some people have been trying to weaponize this issue. I mean, they turn it to instrument of, at times you can even say politicization, which is purely unnecessary. But Labour has made the point that what concerns Labour is about influencing change of policy, not about change of government or, as the case may be. So for me, it's quite commendable. Now, you talk of, is it sustainable? Again, those are the issues we need to discuss in the next 18 months. Don't forget that the PIA, Petroleum Industry Act, was commendably signed by President Buhari last year, August last year. That PIA replaced the old legal framework guiding the petroleum industry, which had been in place since 1969, 53 years. Now, to implement, to have additional 18 months cannot be too long for a law that has been in place obsolete, but which the administration had the bold step to really enact. Now, there are a lot of host of issues in this PIA. Unfortunately, the way it has been presented is just about pricing. It's about fuel subsidy. No, there are a lot of clauses in this PIA, in this bill. There are governance issues of the entire petroleum downstream sector. You need to unbundle the NNPC. For the first time, the corporation has just been registered now as a public company. We can look at the account of NNPC now. In fact, about close to 8 companies are supposed to come out if the policy is implemented. You also have critical labor issues, which we put under the carpet because the sector unions, NOPENG and the PENGASN, the National Union of Petroleum and Gas, they've been insisting that critical labor issues should be factored because you are moving from state control of NNPC, public control, you are moving to private control, ownership, shareholders are coming. You must also migrate labor issues to make sure that labor workers' jobs are protected in that sector. Don't forget that even the oil and gas, now people don't talk of the precarious nature of the work in this work. So labor has also insisted that you need time for that transition. So the next 18 months give us all the opportunities. Are you hearing me? To manage the reform. And I think it's important to factor this point. You see, why the subsidy removal has become difficult over the years, Karen, is because of the shock therapy nature of the way different governments have been implementing it. I mean, you know, I've been involved in this business as a member of NSC. President Obasanjo, you know, former President Obasanjo just woke up one day, increased the price. Without consultation, it was a consternation. The thing couldn't work. We have to go on strikes. I also know President, the late Yaradua, Musa Yaradua, so rest in peace. You know, he also immediately came in, he wanted to. It was a shock. I mean, shock therapy with that engagement, and that led to a series of crises. Of course, President Jonathan also went to the same way. So now for me, this is the best time. This administration is trying to put a place to say, let's have holistic discussion of what the issues are. And that comes to the last point you declare. I think it is clear today, to answer your question, that it can be business as usual. All of us have to come to say reform is inevitable. First, on the part of government, I was happy to listen to the Honorable Minister of Finance talking about refinery. She even gave the figure that by the time the private refinery, some of their common bosses, around 50,000 barrels per day. The Port Harcourt refinery also. So again, these are things that have been ignored before by previous government. Now, Labour too, all of us must understand that it can't be business as usual. This 3 trillion naira, which we are going to cough out now, to manage the reform in the next 1 year, how sustainable it is, we need to make the option. And can those resources not be used for other things? You know, so which means refinery have to be addressed. The issue of pricing too, because the industry those who operate industry, if you allow for private operation, they'll be able to sell at appropriate price as the case may be. So what I'm saying here is that this 18 months give us opportunity to look at all the issues in a way that we're going to have win-win situation. So what we need is to promote more policy dialogue, more engagement, as the case may be. It's already on, but now this truth give us opportunity to look at the factor. And I listened to Comrade Ayuba just now. You always say whatever you call it, what NSC is saying is that let refineries work, let produce locally. I mean, I used to be in textile. Nobody regulate the price of textile product. You just play tape on cement sector. Nobody regulate the price. If you want, but they are our own products. You know, but we must make sure refineries come back. And by the time it comes back, then we'll look at what the numbers look like. And then those are things that can be discussed in a comprehensive roundtable.
Well,
yes.
I believe you have made a point, you know, yes. Because as you rightly said, the government has to factor in some other issues relating to the nation's economy generally before taking a decision on the primary source of the nation's income. Now, let's go to Tengi George Ikoli, who is a lawyer and also an economist with bias in oil and gas. Tengi, economists like you insist that the removal of fuel subsidy is necessary towards the much needed reform. Now, the continued opposition over the years by Nigerians and especially Labour remains unabated. Let us know your own view about the intricacies of oil subsidy in Nigeria.
Thank you for that question. And I've listened to different comments by the participants. Just, I guess, to provide a bit more context for Nigerians, because there's always some level of technical conversation that always happens when we discuss this. The initial speaker has talked about subsidy and the fact that it's a differential between the actual cost of petroleum products and what we get at the pump price. So to then see what that actual cost is comes into looking at the freight costs of getting the products to Nigeria. So from the Northwest Europe to West Africa, you're looking at the cost of the product, you're looking at the Nigeria Port Authority charges, you're looking at the landing cost, and all these different elements make up what we eventually have at the pump price. So what you had initially was that differential being covered by subsidy at some point, and then you had under recovery, being the sort of next element around this. In June 2020, you had a renewed commitment by the government again to regulate the sector. And that came at the height of COVID-19, where you had a huge pandemic and health crisis. The government realized that it didn't have sufficient revenue as well, having to cut the budget, etc., because of that incident. So you had the government realizing that there was no way that it could sustain this subsidy payments, which is the crux of the conversation around sustainability, and having to defray those costs and having to focus on all the other issues pertaining to the economy. We've come out of the recession, yes, but there are still challenges. There is a huge youth population in Nigeria that activities need to be generated for to engage. You have a future that is slightly uncertain for countries like Nigeria that still depend wholly on its fossil fuel for its foreign exchange earnings. You have all these different elements. Right now, we have an economy, a budget that is as a deficit of about 6.2 trillion naira. And then there's this additional cost that has come from NNPC as 3 trillion naira. Let's even unpack that situation. NNPC, as a result of the Petroleum Industry Act, has now been registered under CAMA. So the initial position that we had does no longer exist. So under the PIA, 3176 of the PIA, you have NNPC now being treated as the importer of last resort for a period not exceeding 6 months. And then associating those costs that are associated are then supposed to be accounted for by the Federation, which is what NNPC has done. It has put the bill forward and said 3 trillion naira to be paid by the federal government. First, then his question is, do we have the funds? Okay. Yes, we have the price has increased, has gone to $90, and everyone has celebrated this. But what is the commensurate production that we have? And what is the revenue coming into Nigeria's coffers? Are we able to account for this? Sustainability, again, is a question. One of the challenges that we've seen, and I'd expressed this in June last year, civil society organizations had also expressed this when the initial deregulation policy had been put out. And the different guests have also talked about this. There are always challenges when it comes to implementation. And so we had encouraged the government to put out a framework that would be clear, that would be transparent, that would allow Nigerians to understand what the process was so that we could know and monitor at every juncture where we were. And then that way would have a potential to having a success. Another challenge that we expressed was around communication, allowing Nigerians to understand at every point what the issues were, engaging labor, because again, those have been one of the issues that have in the past reversed or seen the government reverse its position. And that's where we are now. Again, there is this extension for 18 months, but if we don't have an appropriate framework that carries everyone along, then what is to say that after an 18 months extension, this would actually, the deregulation would actually happen again? The PIA was a huge success for the petroleum industry. A lot of us right here in this conversation work towards this. But if you have a situation where there's a challenge around this and the proper framework is not put in place and the PIA can just be easily amended continuously, then have we really achieved our goal? Have we really put in place the right things to help Nigeria in the future? We're only focused on the present, but you have a future where oil is no longer the darling that it once was. We have the gas sector, the midstream sector, which has now been opened by the PIA. There are huge infrastructure projects that are required in that regard. Do we have the funds to invest in that? Should that be a better use of this 3 trillion naira that's being expressed now to go into subsidy? Are there different options that we can also sort of take on board? What happens when the oil is no longer the darling and no longer give us the revenue that we need? How we put in place the things that we need for Nigeria's future? And that, I think, is an element of the conversation that is not really being focused on. We spent all these different sums over the years on subsidy. What about Nigeria's future? How are we planning for it? How are we preparing for it? And again, that sustainability question that keeps on being passed, the buck keeps being passed on to the next administration. There will come a point where there is no other place to pass it on to, and the Nigerian economy will crumble. That's the worst case scenario, but that is where we're likely to go if we don't put the right things and take the right steps to move forward. Because this has happened time and time again. We know what we need to do. Let's just go ahead and do it.
All right, Tengi, speaking, of course, joining us via Zoom. Tengi, thank you. We just pause you for a moment and bring in Olabode Shomi, also joining us via Zoom from Abeokuta. Now, some people, have talked about the timing of, the now suspended subsidy removal. Either some have said maybe because of political exigencies or economic exigencies and all of that. But from your perspective, are there much more intricate issues involved in all of this?
Thank you, and good morning once again. I think primarily, why do you have subsidy in the first place? I mean, those are some of the questions. And at the fundamental of it is that you cannot just leave society to the forces of demand and supply, which basically means that there are chances that the economy can collapse when you leave the economy to the forces, capitalist greed, as it's known. But more importantly, the problem itself is not the subsidy per se, even though it is agreed without doubt that the economy may not be able to do subsidy as we know it. What really is at the root of it is the lack of...
Mr. Showme, we sincerely apologize. We'll have to pause you for a while and try and work on your audio connection. When that is sorted out, we'll come back to you to continue to respond. But let me drop that question at the doorstep of Mr. Odion here. So what do you think, beyond what people are saying about political exigency or economic inflation and all that, are there much more complex issues involved?
Well, I would say yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we now have an NNPC Limited that is trying to claw back some of its losses to the Federation. We have a distribution network that is highly... there's a lot of inefficiencies in the distribution of petroleum products. Take, for instance, we truck a lot of our products from Lagos all the way down. Our pipeline systems rarely work. And then where it works, you have all the people trying to vandalize it and steal petrol and cause massive fires. That's one bit. Now, in terms of it not being... then you also have... There was a statement you made that everybody agrees that subsidy has to go. I don't think everybody agrees. There are people who literally say, look, subsidy is our only benefit that we get from Nigeria.
Then who are the beneficiaries?
Well, they will tell you the people that have to go by bus. I mean, if you remove subsidy, then there's a direct impact on their paycheck, which never really increases. So they would always tell you that, look, keep subsidy because that's the only thing we see from Nigeria. That's I think the Tengi talked about that. What are we leaving for our young people? Because that's the sense that they get. But beyond that, I also want to believe that in terms of the volumes which NNPC says they import and that which translates to subsidy, I would say let's interrogate that, right? I don't have the figures, but when I say subsidy bill, a proposed subsidy bill of 3 trillion, keep in mind the subsidy is a differential. So what is the actual import bill for PMS? Are we talking of 6 trillion? You mean we imported 6 trillion worth of product? Let's assume we say 100, subsidy is 100% of the cost. So if you're saying that differential is just 3 trillion alone, the entire import bill was a 6 trillion. What is NNPC's revenue from even its crude oil sales? So it's a very scary amount to put out there to say 3 trillion naira is a differential in price, right? The other thing is we have what we call the DSDP, DSDP structure where NNPC takes Federation crude. Federation sells crude to NNPC for domestic supply, and NNPC takes it abroad, refines it, and then brings the component in. A lot of it is translated to PMS, but crude oil has other components as well. Is that part of the accounting to reduce the subsidy amount on the Federation? So I would say the 3 trillion part of it, right, has, we need to interrogate those figures from a volume perspective, and I really support the call by the Nigeria Governors Forum to look at the volume of products being brought in. Because if you bring in products, you would have to store with either NNPC storage facilities or third-party storage facility tank farms, right? If you look at the throughput NNPC has paid over time, it's been decreasing. So you would expect that if you're saying that we've imported more product, then what is the throughput you're paying out? What are you storing in third-party tank farms? I know a number of third-party tank farms that are no longer operational because they're not storing product. So the question is, where is NNPC storing all those products if it says it's importing it? So I think that's the complex part of it, determining the volume that we literally have to pay that subsidy cost. And I think once that is audited, not just the naira amount, the volume itself, the liters, once that is audited and we get a clear sense as to what an NPC imports that actually gets imported and used here, then we would have reduced a lot of the conversations around subsidy.
Okay. Comrade Saremu, there are insinuations, of sabotage, in the inability and unwillingness of successive administrations to deal decisively with the crisis of Nigeria's downstream petroleum sector. And historically, we know that subsidy came on board. It was not easy for government at that time to deal with this issue of subsidy. Now we are relying on almost 90% on imported fuel for local consumption. And government today has given 18 months within which issues around subsidy will be discussed and of course put in a proper position for preparatory for the removal of the subsidy. Is that enough time, going by the challenges and of course the complexity of this issue? You have been in labor for a while. Why has it been so difficult for government to deal with this, even when we had, where we had our local production without importing fuel?
Well, Kirin, I think it comes to the issue of governance over the years. And I'm happy you went on that historical lane. There was once a Nigeria that was really totally self-sufficient in terms of production of petroleum products, refining of crude oil into petroleum products. In fact, we've moved from primary refinery at the point to petrochemicals, in which we are trying to maximize all the derivatives from crude oil. But it wasn't also like this before. I know the late Maitama Sule told us this story in the labor movement. He was the first petroleum minister or power mine minister. Maitama Sule, that Damasami of Kano of blessed memory. And he told us how the then government of Nigeria, immediately after independence, put its feet on the ground because British colonialism did not actually want us to have refinery. The whole idea is to export the crude, you refine abroad, and then you bring them back home.
And they have succeeded.
Yeah, no, but I'm just giving you that it comes to governance. Now, he said the pioneer first government, immediately after independence, put his feet on the ground that we must refine our products. And that's what led to the first Port Harcourt refinery, which came on stream around 1965. Then, before they went further, they also had second Port Harcourt refinery. Then you had Warri refinery. And for them to spread the national asset with effort to petroleum production. They also had Kaduna Refinery. I think it was President Buhari, who commissioned who set the ball in motion for the Kaduna Refinery. Now, if you also check the record, part of the third development plan, before President Shagari was overthrown, it was already on the drawing board to have 2 additional refineries strictly to produce refined petroleum products for export, strictly for export. There was once in Nigeria that the first development plan, second development plan, third development plan, that you can't be exporting raw materials and then you import final refined products. And that's how petroleum industry sector was built. By 1980s, Nigeria was not only self-sufficient, we were the ones supplied the entire West African sub-region. Now, how did this happen? Governance, leadership. Now, but later, we refused to service this refinery. We refused to maintain them. Then later, we went to structural adjustment program, in which they said government had no business in business. I listened to the second fellow who spoke in the US. The argument is not between state and the market. Two of them, we need them together. No private operators. I used to come from private sector. No private operator can survive without government that puts policies in place. Even the Aliko Dangote refinery we are talking about, highly commendable, highly great. He had support of the state to make it possible in terms of financing, in terms of appropriate policy to make it work. Now we ignore this and it didn't work. But that's what history says. That's why it's so remarkable now that for the first time after a long time, this administration has listened to the pressure of the people that you must do something about your existing refinery. And about I don't know the figure, you will know better, Odion, $1.3 billion have been put to Port Harcourt Refinery. The idea is to bring it on board. And I listened to Honorable Minister of State Silva that this part of the things that will be done within this period to make sure that refinery gets rolling back again. If Port Harcourt work, that would be quite good. Then, of course, the Aliko Dangote, the famous 150,000, I hope by the end of this year it comes on board. Now, what we are saying here is that it's about governance that will make us to really... We're the only OPEC country without functioning refinery. It's unacceptable. When actually we used to be one of the leading lights of OPEC in the 60s, 70s, that others copied to make things possible. The vision of independence is not that you are politically independent. You must be economically independent. We could also see during the lockdown. Even if we wanted to import petroleum products, it was difficult because everybody... there was a global, lockdown of the supply chain. So you need to build your self-reliance along that line. So I'm happy now that we are concerned about that to get it possible. But, I came from this tradition that we used to believe state government can run businesses. And I still believe government has its role to play. But, Kiran, let me quickly...
I'm not cutting you short.
Yes, let me wrap up.
The inability of successive administrations to put our refineries back on stream. Some reasons were adduced as to obsolete equipment, obsolete technology, and what have you. But the refinery in Texas has been there in the 50s, and it's still functioning till date. We have heard about the turnaround maintenance all these years. So how would Nigerians believe now that $1 billion or naira has been allocated for bringing back Port Harcourt Refinery will be possible? That is the question, because there are doubts.
It's also clear that, if it were to be possible, that private investor could raise the amount of money, I'm very sure some will have been attracted to go into it. But it's also a matter of policy. And this way, even when I was in the Labour movement, we used to have a lot of healthy debate. Can government state-run refineries? Yes, they can. They've done so before, as we have seen in the past. But issues have also changed. They became more complex. And I could recollect during President Musa Yar'Adua, immediately he came in. One of the issues we contended with the administration is not just the pricing, but before he came in, President Obasanjo had already sold Kaduna Refinery to Aliko Dangote. You must be aware of this. And then we oppose it based on the fact that this was a national asset. You should maintain them. Now, Aliko pull out, and within 10 years now, it's almost turning out the largest refinery, which has the combined capacity of the entire 4 refineries. Now, what is the lesson of this? With the benefit of insight now, Kaduna Refinery, certainly nobody's even talking of turning it around, which means we must also rethink how do we manage this public asset. And this way I'm saying that we must have a different orientation. All of us have to do conversation that if Port Harcourt Refinery comes on stream, are you going to still return it back to be run by NNPC, which has now been transformed? I mean, you raise the point, it's now a registered company under KAMA. It has to run like business, and to do so that you allow private investors. So we need to find a way to have public-private partnership,
yes,
and at times, private ownership that can run very well to make things possible. At the end of the day, what we should be concerned, including labor, is about jobs, availability of products, appropriate pricing that is fair to everybody.
Comrade,
so whether it's government-run or private-run, those are the issues. But government will be the one to lay framework for this debate.
We want to really look at how this issue, because whether we like it or not, government has listened to the voice of labor and of the people, and has gone ahead to suspend removal. But I've listened to a number of economists, speak about the issues. You understand, and most of them, like you rightly pointed out earlier on, that it shouldn't be business as usual. So they agreed that, look, this is not sustainable, so something must be done. But they've also talked about the approach that government has taken, and that's why I'm asking Tengi, who's joining us via Zoom. What do you think is wrong with the approach that government has taken to address the issue of subsidy removal? And what do you think can be done within the 18-month framework that has been given?
Okay. Thank you for that question. I alluded to that in my initial commentary. So we had noted initially, again, I say we in terms of civil society had already sort of signaled that this was going to potentially happen. One of the key things we lacked was communication. When the initial deregulation policy had been put forward, there were some attempts to engage with the public, but then those ceased. And we've already expressed, I think, all the conversations, all the comments that have been made, essentially that there is a trust issue. When you say, how do we know now that refineries will work after these investments that are put into it, that's reflective of a lack of trust. And what's required is to have a framework. How do we also know that this intervention to expand beyond 6 months to 18 months will work? Is if we see a framework that shows what the government's plan is, a very detailed framework that every Nigerian can monitor, that's transparent, that's accessible. And then we can see sort of the steps that the government tends to take, and that has to be consistently done. When there is a keeping and adherence to that framework, there will be more trust and all Nigerians can begin to follow through. Another aspect is in terms of how do we ease the pain? It's a challenge that has been expressed. Different options have been explored. There have been different approaches that have been taken by different countries. Ghana has used different models. Nigeria has tried other ones. We've talked about cash transfers because there has been that expression that subsidy payments actually do not reach the low-income households, which is intended to actually reach. It affects, you have prices around maybe reflected in Lagos, in Abuja, but you would still see around the fringes, around communities, that the prices are always high above those that are set anyway. So it's essentially, how do we transfer that to Nigerians? Do we look at transport options? Do we have infrastructure options as well? And again, it's just having that clarity, communicating what that is, how it's going to reach the low-income households, and making sure that it's done in a way that is transparent, and then the government adheres to it.
Thank you. Odion, I'd still like to ask you, because when the Minister of Finance was speaking, she was, speaking, you could see the confidence in her. And again, she gave us 18-month, framework, within which, of course, the subsidy will be removed. Now, do you see any mechanism in place for the realization, for meeting with the 18-month framework?
Well, to my mind, the 18 months is to allow for local refineries to kick in. That's the truth. there's really no communication plan that you put out there that would assure Nigerians or give them comfort about the impending or the effect that they have. We've had this communication plan in 2011. I mean, it was an extensive conversation, and Comrade here referred to it, right? We had the ministers come, we had town hall meetings, and by the time he came, there was a Save Nigeria, Occupy Nigeria. The point is, people will react in terms of the price shock. There's no way you can blunt that reaction. It would always come out. So I think the 18 months is pretty much to allow for refineries, particularly the Dangote refinery, to kick in, and then perhaps some of the rehabilitation work in the Port Harcourt refinery to also kick in. That will reduce the pressure. But here's where I think we're missing this whole thing, right? Even these 18 months, I have a big problem with it. You see, petroleum products, it's a commodity, so commodities rise and fall. The price you bought Gary today will not be the same price you bought Gary in 2 weeks' time or in 1 month's time. It moves. Now, what governments have tried to do, or in other climes, is to have a steady, a periodic price period where there's an increase or a decrease. Everybody knows that at the end of, in South Africa, everybody knows at some point in June, prices will go up or go down, depending on all the parameters that you use.
But shortly after the signing of the PIA, there was price adjustment in the pump price.
Yeah, but it was done. It was done in a very well during the COVID period. It was easy for government to say, okay, we're going to move price, and they started announcing it every month because there was over recovery at some point. Once prices started to go up, I think by November of 2020. They stopped making those adjustments because now it was now an under recovery situation and you couldn't start to push the price. The point I'm making is, if you want to run, one of the ways to brace Nigerians up is to say, look, at periodic intervals, you're going to have price reviews. The same what we have in the electricity sector, where every 6 months there's a price review. And there's a mechanism for price review. There's a minor review, major reviews. It happens 5 years. We should also have the same templates in the petroleum sector, where you know that April is coming, or what's the price? You can track the international price of petrol. Even though we refine it here, the template is already out there. Transporters start to plan. It is this lack of planning. I think Comrade Aramu said shock therapy. The way we've always done this is just shock therapy. You just wake up one day, prices have gone up, or, we need to have that method, that template. And then that's the only way you can make Nigerians brace for this impact. Otherwise, no matter the communication plan you put, the day the prices change at the pump price, things will happen. Labor will go on strike. The inflation will hit. So I think going forward, this 18 months should be to put that price review mechanism in place so that when a Dangote comes in and other refineries come in, people know that, okay, these are the adjustments that will happen at this particular period, and they can brace. Employers can brace, government can brace, other people can brace, can plan if prices go up. So that's what I think needs to happen in this 18 months period.
Okay, Comrade, the World Bank, and in fact the two world bodies, the IMF and the World Bank, has already sounded the alarm bells, to Nigeria, saying that further delay in subsidy removal in Nigeria will bring about drain pockets for both the federal and state governments in Nigeria. And this issue of a stay action, well taken. But consequently, the consequences of the delay is another matter for conversation. And that will also make it very difficult for the implementation of a PIA and, of course, the reform of the downstream oil sector. What effect is this going to have going forward? That's before the 18 months that we are looking forward to.
Well, I think I'm not sure when you refer to the World Bank, it's difficult for me to really respond to that because, World Bank could raise an alarm, and I'm really not impressed with that because it's not supposed to be a bank dealing with World Bank. It's not a bank that should be dealing with alarm. It shouldn't be alarmist. I think we are talking of policy engagement, what should be done. But World Bank could have the luxury of raising alarm. I think what is important is what is our own choice for national development. And every discussion we must have over this transition with respect to the reform of petroleum industry sector should be within the framework of the Petroleum Industry Act, which we know everybody has agreed is a breakthrough. With all the imperfection, it has been put in place. And what does it mean, Petroleum Industry Act? It doesn't mean Petroleum Subsidy Removal Act. You know, and I agree that audience says so, it's about communication and also, but I will even put it more, we need more engagement. I think we need to promote more knowledge about the entire provision of Petroleum Industry Act. You know, extremely very, very important, because it talks of fiscal framework, it talks of regulatory framework, it talks of unbundling the NNPC. You know, there are other issues tied to the social issues which will be of interest to labor, that it also talks about when you unbundle, you open up the sector, you allow for free entry of private investor, more jobs will be created, which is the concern of labor, as the case may be. Not only that, decent jobs. So I'm saying the next 18 months should provide the framework for that robust engagement. I just listened to the outcome of the first Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the CBN, and then Governor Emefiele, Governor of CBN, put it very well, in their communique that we should have more robust engagement with all the sectors of the society on this transition in a way that it won't be disruptive of the economy. And that's the point I'm raising. In fact, CBN said we should have a gradual approach to this process, which this period gives us. And what are the gradual approaches? CBN also says so. They are not hiding the statistics. Currently, food inflation is very high. We have this almost 18% double-digit inflation.
Sorry,
now, what will be the impact of this policy on
I'm sorry
yes.
to interject.
So,
we've overshot our time for commercial break.
Oh,
yes.
That's fine.
So we just pause it for a while and take a commercial. When we come back, you continue. Let's go for the break now.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
There's a drop of goodness in everyone. Share goodness with someone today. Malta Guinness. Enjoy a world of good.
Since coming into office in 2015, the Buhari administration has recorded unprecedented achievements in all sectors, especially in the provision of infrastructure, which is the key to economic growth. Never in the history of this country has any other administration done so much with so little. I recall that when this administration came into the office, the price of crude oil, which provides for 80% of Nigeria's budgetary revenues and 95% of foreign exchange earning, dropped drastically, thus reducing the amount of resources available to the federal government. In spite of this, the administration has continued apace with massive infrastructure developments.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
We are all Nigerians. Against all odds, we shall and must remain united. We may have our challenges, our problems, and setbacks. However, together we shall overcome them all. What doesn't break us shall make us stronger. This is the mindset that shall bring peace, progress, and prosperity to our beloved country. Do not let tribal and religious sentiments govern how you think, act, or feel. Don't be influenced by those who want to destroy our precious national unity. Everybody who's a Nigerian is your brother and your sister. This is the mindset of the new Nigeria. It is also the mindset that we must all adopt. Let us support each other in creating the Nigeria of our dreams. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
The Council of Our Fathers.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Good morning, Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. We're looking at issues, fuel subsidy issues, and of course, going forward within the next 18 months. Just before we went on break, Comrade Isaremu was trying to, round off his thoughts. But you can also take along with this question because you keep talking about governing framework. And I know that the PIA is itself a governing framework for, the industry. And the subsidy issue is just an aspect of it. Before now, Labour had an engagement with government on conditions for removal of subsidy. And one of the items Labour wanted was bouncing back of the refineries. Now going forward, what is the content of this governing framework that you talk about, which Labour is asking to,
Yeah, thank you, Claire. So just to recap, what I was saying is that what has come out of this is that we don't need to have policy through ambush. What is being referred to as shock therapy. We have to make reform very gradual. And I've told you that even CBN has alluded to that. Then the last one is that reform should be consensual. It has to be to involve everybody. It's not going to be based on vested interest, whether the oil importers want it, multinationals want it, but the citizens must also be factored into it. And that comes to your question that what should be the governance framework. I've said so. PIA gives us that framework because there are a lot of clauses in that law with all the imperfections that are clear for us to work on. That should be administrative, regulatory framework, fiscal framework. What should be the take to government when oil is produced? Don't forget that the old petroleum tax has been abolished now. They have a new tax regime because we must also think of what will come if you unbundle the NNPC, what comes to the government federation. Then you also have transfer of assets, of course, bringing back refineries, which the NSC is concerned about. So if we can have a framework now to look at, to have a template to say what's happening, turn around for Port Harcourt Refinery. When is it? What is the level of performance? When are the private refineries coming? When are we building local goods? Now, if we are getting improvement on that, then, of course, Labour must also come, and as they will always be coming, in fact, they articulated their view recently. They wrote a long letter to the National Economic Council in which they itemized some of the issues that should be there. And I think this is where we must think about. Honourable Minister of Finance have even showed the intention, say they want to do conditional transfer, of citizen and also, but Labour may have a different view because at times you don't know the register that are being used. Now, you don't need to do conditional when you have Labour already on the ground. What are the concerns of Labour? Labour says all the key labour issues within that sector must be addressed. Jobs must be protected. It should be secure. We can have a pact on that one. Not even only that. Labour must also listen to find out that if we continue this omerage, and I agree with the audience, I mean, I don't believe we need 3 trillion naira. We don't know the amount of petroleum product we are consuming. Even 60 million liters figure that have been brandished is debatable. You know, whether we consume to that level. We can, but let's even assume that's the figure. We must also decide, do we need that money to service a product, you know, such as petrol? And because the money meant for that cannot be made available for sustaining jobs now. President Buhari, I mean, you know, with the COVID lockdown, with 2 recessions, I mean, he has head on to keep jobs in public sector, commendably. You know, we used to have story of downsizing, right-sizing. If you were, we didn't have that challenge. He kept the job. Salaries of public officers, public employees are being paid. Government gave bailouts to some state government. Now, is that sustainable? If we have this, going to have this kind of money that goes into, subsidizing a product with all the mess that goes with it. Now, those are the options we need to sit down to discuss.
In terms of physical structures, what do you want to see?
So the fiscal structure, I've told you where refineries have come on board. Then the concern of maybe within this period too, we must be able to food inflation need to really come down, because that's also inflationary pressure. It's one of the real crises. You can't drive serious reform when people are poor and they are down. You know, people are looking at price. So, and I'm happy a lot of work is being done now to address insecurity. Farming communities must have resumed within this period, and the most, all of us have to address that one. Now, if things get a little bit more stable, am I communicating microeconomic stabilities? Yes. Then you can now say, okay, we are looking for a way to have a comprehensive reform to get it done. And I think it's doable, you know, and we just have to really get it done. And I said, it can't be business as usual. As it is to be for everybody. So government cannot say be importing again, we must produce locally. Organized labor, civil society must also know that we must have a way to manage these scarce resources. I mean, diesel has been deregulated. Petrol has also been sold at the audio saying as much, you know, and I know it's a lot of impact on people. I mean, I know what it takes for me to buy diesel to even run my institute, you know, but life still continue. All we need to do is that what will be the benefit arising from that. So on the last note, we must intensify proper education. In fact, engagement, not just communication. There will now be constant engagement within these 18 months. And my institute, you know, is also available to create framework for that.
You have spoken so much about engagement, which yes, of course I think is necessary.
Absolutely.
But Nigerians would also like to have the practical realities that will impact on their lives. We've been discussing this issue without even touching on other aspects of our national life. Nigeria appears to be a consuming nation. We're not into manufacturing as we should be. And we also rely so much on imported goods and commodities, including raw materials and all that. And I am thinking that within the 18 months that we're talking about, yes, the federal government has considered that a lot needs to be done, and one of them, which is cardinal, is that of bringing back our refineries, right? And Tanguy, you have talked about effective communication, and of course, it has been amplified by comrade here that it is very crucial with respect to what the nation needs to do going forward with the issue of oil subsidy removal. Now, the practical framework and the actualization and of subsidy removal within 18 months, how plausible is it? Are there specific steps that we would like governments to take to see that all the complexities, all the challenges surrounding removal of oil subsidy could be dealt with decisively between now and 18 months? What are those steps?
Okay. Yeah, very good point. And I think some of that has been alluded to by the different guests. So there have been different approaches. Again, the immediate approach of removing subsidy, again, there's that shock value that has already been discussed. There's potentially a phased approach that could be taken to adjust. The government had started that last year, again, when the prices were a lot lower. which they abandoned when the prices sort of got a bit higher. So it's essentially making sure that they're able to commit to whatever approach that it is that's going to be taken. The Honorable Minister of Finance had mentioned that the infrastructure challenges. I'd initially mentioned when I spoke about those elements that make up the price that comes to the pump. So one of those has been that with the refineries. One of the suggestions that had been made when the initial policy had been put together was around privatizing the refineries. Again, because you've had maybe an LNG example that has a lot more private sector involvement that has worked better. You have the Dangote refinery coming on stream, but again, that's a private business, which the government, again, doesn't have stake in at the moment. So it's essentially making sure that we have those elements in place. And again, there's that shock value, it's going to happen. So one thing I think everyone has emphasized is that the government has to commit to that. So it's not just a communication framework that I mentioned earlier on. I also mentioned that there has to be a framework that is committed to and informed by the public. And again, there's that buy-in as also essential. And then it just has to be done. But another question, again, that is not being discussed in 18 months, that's February, you have the next elections coming on stream. How is that transition going to happen? How is that actually going to take place? It can't be left to the end because, again, we know what that all portends when you have the campaign sort of cycle coming into play as well. So that aspect of the conversation also has to be made. Is it going to be 18 months or slightly less? Again, to make sure that it's actually effective as well. So the elements that we've discussed, just to summarize, is one, potentially maybe having a phased approach, including essentially ensuring that those refineries do work as well, ensuring that we're able to communicate this to Nigerian people, ensuring that there's a monitoring framework that we can also hold the government accountable to. But the government also has to commit to do this because, again, we've seen in the past, and I keep emphasizing this, and we've all talked about this as well, where there has been an abandonment of whatever approach that has been chosen. So different frameworks have actually been chosen in the past, but there's been an abandonment at different times. So there has to be a commitment to that. Whatever it is, there will be a shock value to some extent, even if it's a phased approach, but there has to be a commitment to whatever approach is eventually taken. Again, we've said one, to limit the impact on Nigerians, certainly, but also to make sure that we actually have this, because sustainability is a concern, and Nigeria has too many issues that it has to resolve beyond this as well for the economy to continue to grow and to be viable.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's quickly take just in less than 60 seconds or so. Odion, how do we get the refineries to work? To continue to do TAM, to turn around maintenance, or sell? And what is the place of modular refineries in all of this?
Well, how we get the refineries to work have already started. The NMPC, they've started the rehab, the revamp of Port Harcourt refinery. And 90%, that refinery should attain production to about 90% of its level within the 18 months period. So like I said, the 18 months window is just to allow a number of local refineries coming, including a number of the modular refineries that are being constructed with support by the Nigerian Content Board. But in 18 months, I think the most important thing we should do is focus on increasing our local refining capacity. Dangote's refinery will kick in, God willing, end of this year. That should reduce the pressure on imports. We should also start to look at auditing the volumes that we import into this country. NMPC is hitting us with a bill of 3 trillion just for subsidy. Is suspect, right?
Thank you. Yes, okay. I know, comrade. What is the place of labor? Your institute, Labor Institute, in all of this, because it keeps happening on communication engagement.
Yeah. To add to that, 3 trillion naira has been set aside to fund subsidy. Governors frowned at it, saying it is unreasonable. Now that amount should have been put into some other sectors of national economy. Just a few seconds to address these two issues.
Okay, well, for my institute, I think Claire, you said so. Whether I'm here to add to the discussion, we'll be party to promote dialogue along this issue, because workers are citizens, so they must be well informed about socio-economic issues, which include the issue of this deregulation. And the beauty of the institute is that it's also tripartite. It's not just labor. We have employers, we have government officials. So we can create a platform for robust engagement with organized private sector, with the NNPC, with the two major labor centers, who have now have confidence in the institute to make it possible. So I think we can get so. But in addition to what are the practical issues, which you talk about, could be put in place. I also know there's a new initiative now. I don't know how far about gas-powered vehicles initiative. Yes. Again, within these 18 months, we should let it to be real. So that the alternative means to petrol. Then there's also a lot of effort going on railways. Because we need alternative means of transportation. I mean, many countries of the world, fuel has been deregulated. In UK, people don't care. They go by train, by tubes. So now I go to Kaduna regularly by rail. I don't know what the price of petrol for my car will look like, because there's Lagos Ibadan is not real. Within these 18 months, we should power it more. And I think there's also Itape and, these are the things we must sit down to discuss. Now for the governors, I mean, they are not helpless. They are members of the National Economic Governing Council. In fact, we elect them to check those figures for us, whether they are real or not. And I'm very sure National Assembly also is concerned about some of these numbers, as the case may be. So I think the beauty of this, what do you call it now, putting on hold, I don't want to say reversal, is that we have all the time to now build consensus around the follow, so that we should replace policy monologue with policy dialogue.
Okay, this is where we conclude this edition of the program. Of course, your contributions this morning have, of course, brought to the fore the decision that the President has taken to reverse the earlier decision on the removal of oil subsidy. Comrade Saremo, DG Michael Umodu, Labour Institute, we thank you for coming this morning.
Thank you so much, Kiri.
And we also like to thank Mr. Odion Omorfaman, energy expert and CEO, New Hampshire.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure hosting you this morning. Tengi George Ikoli, a lawyer and economist. I think you are more of an economist than a lawyer from your contribution this morning. We appreciate your commentaries on this edition of the program. Thank you. I hope you come again when next we ask you to. All right. And next, of course, is from the sporting world.
Nigeria Super Falcons head coach Randy Waldrum has invited